A disclaimer before we start, that if you came here to hear your fortune, your future, your horoscope to be read, I'm sorry, I will not do that today. Maybe if you pay me, it's another story. But there's just one prediction I'm very happy to give, that I have no doubt that when we leave here Sunday night, we're all going to leave here weighing a few pounds more than when we came here for the retreat. So, every newspaper has a horoscope page. Shingles for palm readers all over. Psychics fill the airwaves. Many successful people you read about, people in the financial world and other things, are constantly consulting with psychics of different forms. It's something that's so much a part of society, even here in our world. In other parts of the world, in South America, it's much more prevalent. And what we're going to discuss today is, what is the Jewish point of view? Is it something that we're allowed to go to? Can we go to a psychic? Should we read the horoscopes? Etc., etc. So, I'm not going to hold you in suspense. It's very clear in the Torah. There's a verse in Deuteronomy. There's one in Leviticus as well, but there's a verse in Deuteronomy which says very clearly, and it packages a few things together: there shall not be found amongst you anyone who passes his son or daughter through fire, a soothsayer, a diviner of auspicious times, one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer. For anyone who does these things, abomination to God. And for this reason, God says, I'm chasing those who are living in Israel now. I'm chasing them away and giving you the land, because they practice all of these things. And when we talk about a sorcerer, a diviner, these refer to people who predict futures. And the Torah clearly says it's an abomination and it's something that's not allowed. So it's not a discussion whether it's allowed or not. It's clear that it's not allowed. So the class is over, basically. We can all go now to Sham. No, what we're going to discuss today is two things. Number one, from a Torah, a Jewish point of view, are these things real? Psychics, I'm not talking about the ones who are con artists and just take your money and tell you Baba Maisa stories, but is there some truth to what they're saying? And if it is real and it is true that you can predict your future, know what will happen, and when you will get married, and when you will have a child, and when you'll become a millionaire, then why can't we partake of it? Why can't we go and just know what's going to happen if they have those powers and those abilities? And what's very interesting is that the whole study of the fascination with constellations, with the stars, with what's going on in the heavens, is something that's very close to the Jews. Just a few examples. When God promises to Abraham, God chooses Abraham, or Abraham chooses God, and accepts him as the creator and the ruler of the world, the master of the world. And then God says, from you I will make a nation. And God promises immediately, this nation I will create from you. You will have multiple descendants, like the sand of the sea and the stars of the sky. He repeats it to Jacob as well. The stars of the sky, something we look up to, the stars, the skies. Actually, the first mitzvah in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, while the Jews were still in Egypt, the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people was when God commanded Moses with the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, which is the mitzvah of the Jewish people counting their time by the moon. And God did not just say, Moshe, look at the moon and at the cycle of the moon, which is only 29 and a half days, and not the cycle of the sun, which is 365 days a year. But God gave Moshe an astronomy lesson. And Maimonides, in his magnum opus, in the Yad HaChazaka, one of the most complex laws that he records are those laws related to understanding the entire movements of all the celestial beings above, and to really understand where the moon fits in and what's the birth of the moon. And the line between astronomy and astrology is a very thin line. Once you have a fascination with what's going on above, what do they mean? What forces do they have? We find actually related to Avram, to Abraham, that God had promised Abraham, as we mentioned before, he will have children, descendants. An entire nation will come from him. But Abraham and Sarah were married for many years and they didn't have children. And they were not youngsters. They were already older. And Abraham, at every opportunity that he had, he reminded God, what's with my children? Where are the children that you promised me? Instead of your name being Avram, we will call you Avraham. And your wife's name, instead of being Sarai, will be called Sarah. And yes, Avram and Sarai could not have children. But Avraham and Sarah could have children. And soon thereafter, they gave birth to their one and only child, from whom the whole Jewish people were created. So obviously, there's something going on. The stars tell a story. We find a piece of Talmud in the tractate of Shabbos that has a long discussion about how we can predict things about a person based on the day of the week they were born. If you're born on Sunday, it means you're going to have a certain personality. On Monday, on Shabbos, Friday. And then the Talmud, there's another opinion that it's not really based on the day of the week. The other opinion that says that it's based on the hour of which you were born. What is going on in the heavens during the hour you were born, that determines, that influences who you will be, what type of person you will be. And it enumerates, I'll just say a few of them. It says if you're born, it brings the 7 hours. It says if you're born during the hour of the sun, you will have a distinguished appearance. You will eat and drink on your own, but you'll be an open book. Everyone will know who you are. You will not be a successful thief, so give up on that. If you're born during the hour of Venus, then you will be wealthy but promiscuous, because Venus is fire and the passion, it's unadulterated passion. If you're born during the hour of Mercury, you will be radiant and wise. If you're born during the hour of the moon, you will suffer affliction, like the moon gets smaller and bigger all the time. If you're born during the hour of Saturn, you'll be a man whose plans will be unfulfilled. I'm not reading all of them. If you were born during the hour of Jupiter, you'll be a man of righteousness, charitable. And it says if you're born in the hour of Ma'adim, which is Mars, you'll be a man who spills blood. And the Talmud says that means you either be a surgeon, doctors, a thief, a slaughterer, a shochet, or a mohel, a circumciser, but there'll be blood in your life. And one rabbi said that I was born during the hour of Mars, so his colleague said, yeah, we can see that, the way you treat people. So we see that there's clearly an influence from the constellations. The various celestial beings above have an influence, a direct influence on the person of who you're going to be, and very predictable of your personality. We actually find there's a book. There was a book called Sefer Yetzirah. It's a Kabbalistic book. According to many, it was authored by our forefather Abraham. We still have it. And that book is full of discussion of the constellation and its various powers and influences. So as we see throughout the various examples I just brought, is that there is something real about the heavens as a sign, a telling sign about us, each one of us individually, who we are and what our future holds. But now let's look at another side. Again, in the discussion in the same tractate, it brings a story. The story is about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest Jewish sages that ever learned, and just to bring him into our retreat, Rabbi Akiva, though he was, the Talmud makes a statement, Kulu aliba de Rabbi Akiva, that everybody studies according to the method that Rabbi Akiva had set up. The Talmud is based on Rabbi Akiva almost. And Rabbi Akiva did not know how to read the alphabet or to study Torah until he was the age of 40 years old. He started his studies at 40, and yet he became one of the greatest Jewish scholars, leaders of all time. So Rabbi Akiva had a daughter, and astrologers told him that the day that your daughter gets married, she will die. A snake will bite her and she will die. Now, Rabbi Akiva, that was a little scary thing to hear. Imagine hearing about your child that the day they get married, they're going to die. But we know it says in the Torah that you don't go to these people to predict the future, and you can't live by it. So he never told this to his daughter. He kept on encouraging her, like every Jewish father, get married, find a shidduch, like we want to dance at your wedding. But in the back of his mind, he was always thinking, but what will happen that night? When she comes home from the wedding, will she survive the night? And she gets married, beautiful wedding. She goes home. The next morning at the crack of dawn, Rabbi Akiva's at her doorstep, wants to see. He knocks on the door, and she opens up. So she tells Dad, you wouldn't believe what happened. She says, last night, I came home tired. I wanted to go to sleep, so I took my hairpin out of my hair, and I stuck it into the wall, and I went to bed. This morning, when I was taking my hairpin, the hairpin was hard coming out, and I pulled it out. There was a snake. The hairpin had pierced through the head of the snake, and it killed the snake. So Rabbi Akiva says, the astrologer was correct and not correct. So he asked her, what did you do special yesterday? Besides getting married, which is a mitzvah, what did you do special yesterday? So she related how during the wedding, when everyone was busy with the joy of the wedding, she noticed there was a poor person that had come to the wedding that no one was looking after. So she gave him a portion of her food and made sure that he was satisfied. She went back to dancing. So Rabbi Akiva says, my daughter, this is what saved you. Your mitzvah that you did yesterday, the extra mitzvah, is what ultimately saved you from meeting your death, which was destined to happen last night. So, is our destiny written in the stars? Rabbi Akiva's story we see not necessarily. How does it work? And the Talmud brings out another story as well to illustrate that. And then there's another statement. The Talmud ends off there with a blanket statement. In Hebrew goes, Ein Mazel li Yisrael. There is no, Jews are not affected by the constellations. A blanket statement, we're not affected. So we understand a little bit more that it's real, but if it's real, then what happened to Rabbi Akiva's daughter? How was she saved? If it's not real, why was Rabbi Akiva worried when an astrologer said she will die? It's not real. So actually, Maimonides and Nachmanides differ on the area of astrology. And Maimonides laughs it off. he says because it's unscientific and it's very, very impossible to prove, it's a general idea, it's not real. People may be smart and look into you and sort of figure out what your future, some people have that sense. They can figure out what it looks like your fate will be by the type of person you are, but there's no real reality to it. And he sort of laughs it off. It's not real. But Nachmanides, and most people concur, is of the opinion that it's 100% real. That yes, our destiny is written in the stars, the constellation, it's all there. But there's one caveat. A Jew has the ability to somehow circumvent their destiny that's written in the stars and change it. How is that done? How can a Jew do that? So, the verse in Deuteronomy that says the prohibition that you cannot go to any future sayers, it finishes off with 5 words. After it says what you're not allowed to do, it says, Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. Be wholehearted with the Lord your God. What does it mean, be wholehearted with the Lord your God? How are you wholehearted? We believe in God or you don't believe in God? What does it mean, wholehearted? So Rashi, the foremost commentator, explains, conduct yourself with God with simplicity and depend on Him. Do not inquire of the future. Rather accept whatever happens to you with unadulterated simplicity, and then you'll be with Him and of His portion. So basically, for a Jewish person, if we put our full faith in God alone, and in how He told us to conduct our lives, then we're able to circumvent, we're able to change our destiny. And we'll explain in a moment how that happens. Now, if we can circumvent our destiny, then how are we under that? How are the stars tell our destiny in the first place? How does it work? Especially for a Jewish person that can change it. So there's a very interesting medrash, and there's also a fascinating commentary from Nachmanides, which sheds a bit of light into the process, which actually touches upon a very fundamental aspect of our relationship with God, as Jews specifically. And the Medrash says like this. There's a parable in Lamentations. There's a parable about a king who entered into a province, a country, and he, with his entire army, captains, generals, commanders, and was victorious against the rulers of that country and deposed them, and now became the new ruler of the country. So now all of the elite and the important people within the country were figuring out, we got to now start making connections with the new leaders of our country. So one said, I will connect with this captain. Another said, I'll connect with this commander. Another one said, I'll forge a connection with the general. And everyone's looking at all the people surrounding the king. And finally, one wise man says, I'm going to forge a connection with the king himself. And he said, he continues, why? Because he says, all the generals, captains, and commanders change. But the king will always remain king. The king is the only one that has real power. At will, he can change anybody's position. But the king, as long as this king rules, the king will never be changed. And this is the insight into how God created the world and He set up the world. And this is what Nachmanides explains. When God created the world, we talk about Bereshit bara Elokim, God created the world, and we, as Jews, we believe that God had direct It was a direct act of God, of the creation of the world, of mankind, of all of us and everything that exists in this world. Hasidic philosophy explains in great detail about how God was involved in every detail of creation. But yet, it didn't just happen that poof, there was a world. There was a process through which God created the world. And the process was that God took steps. And He created levels. First He created one world, a very spiritual world. And then He created a world where the spirituality was a little less forceful. Then He created a world which took on a little bit of an identity of its own, etc., many steps until He came to our world, which is a physical world where we feel independent and totally separate from God. Even though it's not true, but that's the way we feel. So in the hierarchy God made, where He made level after level, and He was involved with every level. But He made these levels, it's a structure that God made, where every level below is connected, and its energy and its life force comes through the level above it. So in our world, our physical world, we're directly under the constellation and the stars. And therefore the flow of energy, of life, of everything that comes to this world comes through those celestial beings. And therefore everything is written in them. It's all there. Because that's the way the flow of God's life to us at every moment comes. And in heaven, past, present, future, it's all there. So it's real. It's there and it comes through it. Now what's interesting is that the structure God created is one that God Himself respects as well. Very often people tell me, why can't God just make miracles? Why can't He just make this person disappear, this enemy of the Jews? And why can't, if someone is so sick, just get out of his bed and walk? We're always looking for these miracles that we read about that happened when the Jews left Egypt, which were so unusual. But the rabbis tell us that actually God does not like to make miracles. Not because it's difficult, but God respects the structure He put into this world. And He'd rather help people or affect things in this world through the natural means that He had created already. So if someone, God forbid, is sick, God wants to heal him through a doctor. Not that you pray and all of a sudden you can walk on your feet again. But a doctor who has studied medicine, understands the body, through him will come your healing. Now, is that not a miracle? How many doctors, I don't know if there are any doctors here, you have patients that come, and with one patient something works, and the next patient that same thing doesn't work. Sure, it's a miracle. Well, it's all the healing that happens is a miracle from God. But God uses natural means. Even when we left Egypt, and God split the sea, the greatest miracle that we're aware of, that God splitting the sea, the Torah says that God brought a wind, an eastern wind, and then all of a sudden the sea stood up like a wall and it split. What's the point of bringing a wind? Wasn't this a miracle? Couldn't God just say the sea should split? But even when God makes some grandiose miracles, He likes to put in it some force of nature so that the structure He created remains, and not to break that structure all the time. And actually, this is one of the ideas of why witchcraft is unacceptable. Because witchcraft and similar types of methods try to break the nature God had created. They try to go above the constellation. They try to break that nature, which God had already set into motion. And God does not want that to happen, and doesn't want anyone to break the forces He'd put into the motion that He had put them. But when it comes to a Jew, there's a back door. There's another element. Because though on one hand we are a creation like everyone else, we all come from Adam and Eve, our bodies came about in the same way that the rest of the world came about. Adam and Eve had children. All the people of the world come from Shem. And not Shem, from Shes, from Seth. Jews and non-Jews as well. But when God gave us the Torah and made us into a nation, at that point, God had given us a new dimension, a soul. And this soul, as the Zohar says, and Hasidic philosophy, it talks at great length, is chelek elaka mimal mamish, is a piece of God. Meaning that though everything in this world, including our bodies, comes through the hierarchical form of creation that God had done, where it was step after step after step, the soul that we have circumvented all those steps, and God just placed it into us. Vayifach ba'apav, He blew into him, into his nostrils, the force of life, which is our neshama. So, for a Jewish person who connects to God with his soul, we all have a soul, but a Jewish person who brings his soul to the fore by doing a mitzvah, like Rabbi Akiva's daughter did, and by strong faith in Hashem, like Rashi says, wholeheartedly with God, putting your faith fully in God, and not looking at what nature may bring. At that point, you bring your soul forth and you circumvent the natural hierarchy and you go around directly to God. And at that point, there's nothing in the stars, because the stars have no control over you. God, who is above the stars, when you connect with Him, you choose your destiny through your free will and your actions, and it's no more set in stone through the system God had set up. And actually, perhaps, and I didn't see this, I'm saying perhaps, this is the reason why when God responded to Abraham and said, Avram, we're going to have to change your name. To Abraham, Sarai to Sarah. But Rabbi Akiva's daughter didn't change her name, didn't do anything that changed her personality. She did a mitzvah. Avram did mitzvahs all day. Why did Avram have to change his name? Because as great as Abraham was, as great as the patriarchs and the matriarchs were, they did not have a legal status as a Jew. Until the Jewish people left Egypt, we were not considered Jewish people with a soul. We did not have that neshama, that soul, a direct piece of God within us. They were much greater than us. But their greatness was their own achievement. It wasn't the gift of God giving a piece of Himself into them. So Avram and Sarah, to be raised above the stars, God had to change, make a change, a different personality, a different name. A different name, okay. Now you can have a child. But today we don't need that. Today we do a mitzvah and we just circumvent the whole hierarchy where our destiny is written in the stars. Now, because we know that Jews can circumvent, now we understand. Yes, by default, things will follow nature and what's written in the stars. But when you take your life into your hands and you do a mitzvah, and you do what God wants and you have full faith in God, that's when you start changing your destiny. That's when you take control of your destiny. And that is one of the reasons why you cannot go to a fortune teller or a psychic just to hear what they have to say. You know, sometimes you say, let me hear what they have to say. I won't follow one of these. I'll do a mitzvah tomorrow. Because that's very dangerous. Because the fact that it's written in the stars, your future, and by default it will happen, that's facts of life. But if you go to someone to reveal in this world, to say what your future is, that gives it an extra stamp where you sort of get under their spell, you cannot escape it. It becomes much more difficult to change your destiny once it's covered you in a much stronger way by being revealed. And there's some fascinating stories I've heard over the years with the Rebbe. How there was a woman, and one story I remember I heard a few times, I can't verify every detail, not like Rabbi Tolushkin, who spoke us every detail, but I've heard it from several people. A fascinating story how there was a woman who was having a hard time sleeping, eating. There was a lot of difficulties she was having, and she was going to one of these fortune teller, future teller. She was going to one of these people to try to help her through her life, to understand where she's heading, what's going on, to give her some remedies. And then somehow she met the Chabad rabbi in Minnesota. And when she told him her problem, she said, let's write to the Rebbe. So she wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said that she should do certain mitzvahs, and everything will be good. And she started to do certain commandments, certain mitzvahs, and all of a sudden things got better. She was able to sleep at night, she was eating normally, life got back to normal. Then things started to happen again. I don't know, 6 months later or so, again she started to have some problems. She was heading back to where she was before in her disorders. So she saw, the Torah doesn't work. Let me go back to this woman who was helping me. So she goes back to the woman and she says, I need your help. So the woman says, I can't help you. There's another soul that's somehow taking you under their cover, that's blocking me from coming next to you, not letting me have control over you. I can only help you if I can control you. And this is why the Torah is so against even finding out for fun, what is my future? Because that could cement it into stone and make it much more difficult for you to change. Now, I don't know how much time we have left, but I want to bring in another angle here, because all this is very nice and good, and we understand why we have to stay away and why we can't live our life based on that, and realize that we have the power to control our destiny. The way we behave will control what our future holds. But if you look in the Tanakh, all over the Torah, you find the Torah is full of talking about the futures. The prophets, the Nevi'im, all the prophets is all about the future. Last 3 weeks on Shabbos and the Haftarah, we've been reading about the terrible things that will happen to the Jews. The prophets were telling us if we don't listen to God. And the things that they describe are happened in its fullest sense, in a literal sense. And then the next 7 weeks, we're going to be reading about the prophecies, about God's great mercy for us, and how the things are going to be good in the future, which will happen when Mashiach will come. So if the Torah is full of telling the future, what's the difference if I go to a prophet or if I go to a serious psychic or someone who's honest and not just out for the buck? So there's a very important difference. A psychic, tarot readers, their power is that they have a talent. We have all different types of talent. Some people are artists, some people have other abilities, and they have a certain talent that they have, that they're able to read and see. In your palm, they can see through tarot cards or whatever it is, or psychics reading the mind. They can see somehow what's in your future. But this is a talent of a human being that's part of the hierarchy of creation. So whatever you're hearing from these people is just reinforcing what already is set into the celestial beings, what's already the stars know. They are not revealing anything new. They're just revealing something that you may not know, but they're able to see. A prophet is a very different story. To become a prophet, we know about, I believe it's 48 prophets that we know by name. But there were thousands of prophets amongst the Jewish people in the era of prophecy till the end of the Second Temple. And to become a prophet wasn't just that you had a talent, you were born to become a prophet. It was a process. And it was a process that was very demanding. And firstly, it demanded that a person have no ego. A person cannot in any way lead their life in a selfish way where it's about me and I am becoming and I is out of your vocabulary. A person has to be God-fearing to the point that they never sin. A person has to occupy themselves all day with serving God through mitzvahs or even the regular activities they do, totally there in a very revealed way for everyone to see that they're serving God. You have to be totally subjugated and nullified before God, your existence. When someone looks at you, they see this is a man of God walking. It's not about your identity. They see you represent something greater. And then you were able to become a prophet and receive messages from God to reveal those messages to whoever was meant to be revealed. So a prophet does not come as a psychic and all of these other people with their talents and their abilities. A prophet comes by putting himself aside and trying to make himself into a conduit that just allows God's words to come through him. In the same way that Moshe Rabbeinu stood at the top of the mountain and the Jewish people heard the 10 Commandments from God, and it was hard for us to decipher what God was saying, because how can you hear God and make sense of it? And we asked Moshe to repeat it. But Moshe, to us, was just a conduit, who was someone who, holy enough, that somehow God's words resonated with him, and he was able to allow it to flow through him to us. It wasn't because Moshe was great and smart. It was because Moshe was totally at one with God, that therefore we accepted and we listened to his words, not only the 10 Commandments, but the rest of the Torah, which we received through Moshe. And this is what a prophet is all about. A prophet is not here to read the stars and tell us what's going to happen. A prophet comes through the other method that circumvents. It's directly a message from God, as most prophecies were, to try to chastise the Jews, and times when they were not listening, to behave better, to change our ways so that we can deserve better. And at times when we were down and we felt that despondent, God was picking us up and say, don't worry, there's a future. You'll get up. Though you feel down, you'll get up. And because the prophet is that, therefore the prophet doesn't fit into the hierarchical structure where it's written, but he's delivering God's word, which is from above. The God, the source of all the creation, the beginning, before he set the creation in motion, coming directly to the Jewish people through the prophet. So to sum it up, and I think actually it's very apropos, we're going in a few minutes to Shabbos. And it's very interesting, the week, for a Jewish person, the week is like a very difficult thing to, if you look at it objectively, it's very hard to know how do you live like a Jew. 6 days a week, we are told you got to go out into the world, you got to work, you got to make a career, you got to make money, you got to be successful, especially if you want to put kids through Jewish education and you want to be able to give them all the best. And we participate in the world and we play the same game everyone plays to try to get ahead in life, obviously, honestly, as a Jew, according to the Torah. And then it comes Shabbos, and we make a full 180-degree turn. Everything that we were doing and occupying ourselves with, all of a sudden we cannot do. No more being productive, no more working. You can't even touch a phone. You can't do anything beyond what is within your vicinity. Total change. And that's how we spend our day. Obviously with spiritual things, with prayer, with family, with Torah study, and with connecting to God. So the week represents our life as part of being part of the world. In the week, we're like everyone else. We're part of the structure of the world that Jews got to work the same way everyone else has to work. We don't get away with it just because we're Jewish, that we don't have to work. We have to do what everyone else has to do to get ahead. But it comes Shabbos, we're not allowed to work. And during certain periods in Jewish history, and even in America, in the early 1900s, many people who kept Shabbos lost their jobs on a weekly basis, because if you didn't work Shabbos, then you were out of a job. And it was a very difficult test for many people coming to this country. But Shabbos is the day when we connect to God with our soul. Shabbos, the emphasis is not the body, the way we're similar to everyone else. Shabbos is the day we connect to God, a soul connection, where we connect to God directly, circumventing all the process of creation directly to God. And with that one day of Shabbos connecting sincerely, as we're going to do this Shabbos, and hopefully every Shabbos thereafter, that gives us the strength that the next 6 days, though we're still going through the same motions everyone else goes through, we still always remember that we can control our own destiny through mitzvahs and through believing in God wholeheartedly. And knowing that, and we know that one of the things we're waiting for is the Mashiach, the great redemption that's about to come. This is the only thing that in the Torah that's not predicted. We don't know when it's going to happen. And one of the reasons is because its happening is dependent on us. It's when we have banked enough mitzvahs, enough good deeds, which, like the Rebbe said, we've already done so. God already has to bring Mashiach. We can bank more, but the amount of self-sacrifice and commandments and Jewish life and identity the Jews have gone through in the 2,000 years of exile, almost 2,000 years, we've definitely banked so much. And Mashiach will come when that final mitzvah will be done, that will tip the scale, which that mitzvah can come from any one of us. And then the destiny that we have created, which will change the world forever, should come very quickly in our days.
Click subscribe to see more exclusive content for the most sought-after Jewish speakers, teachers, and thinkers.